All right, we're calling the April 2nd Heritage Preservation Commission meeting to order. Liz, could you please do a roll call?
Yes. Davies?
Here.
Coleman?
Here.
Morris?
Here.
Mueller?
Here.
Welbert?
Here.
And Chairperson St. John.
Here. That moves us on to adopting the agenda. Have you all had a chance to look at the agenda? Any questions or on it? Could we get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All, any opposed? So the motion carries to approve the agenda. Moving on, item 4, visitor presentation. Is there anyone here who would like to speak about anything that's not on tonight's agenda? Any visitors? Okay, cool. From there's no one here to speak, so we'll move on to item 5. Approving the minutes from our last meeting, March 5th. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes.
Any issues, corrections, questions? Good. Good. Could we have a motion to approve the meetings of March 5th, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All ayes, so the motion carries and the minutes are approved. And next, item 6, we have a consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at that? Just shifting by 1 year, the timeline. Any discussion or anything on that?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Good. It doesn't really affect our commission at all. Could we get a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Move to second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? And we have approved the consent agenda. That's easy. That moves us to action items. This is the public hearing to approve the site alteration permit for 2 residential buildings and renovation of Ernst home at 211 and 217 Walnut Street. And Liz is going to give us a little presentation on the action.
Yes, I will. Thank you, members of the HPC. We have a site alteration permit in front of us tonight. It's specifically for the S-Lot and the Ernst home, which are located at 211 and 217 Walnut Street here in downtown Chaska. So to give you a visual of where those sites are located, they're exemplified on the screen here. So the Ernst home is on the southerly lot at 211 Walnut Street, and then the S lot is just north of that at 217 Walnut Street. So currently a vacant lot there. So in terms of a background, and this is kind of just refreshing your memory from when we looked at this about a couple months ago. But back in 2014 is when the Ernst home was relocated from its original location in Fireman's Park to its current location at 211 Walnut Street. And that was due in part to help facilitate the redevelopment efforts at Fireman's Park. So it's now in its new home within downtown Chaska. And then with the S lot, it was in December of 2014 that a fire caused extreme damage to the S house, and it was subsequently demolished in 2017 after the city applied for 2 different state grants to try to preserve and rehabilitate that structure. However, those 2 grants that were applied for were denied by the state, and we had no other option but to demolish it. So that was done in 2017. So since that time, the S lot and the Ernst home have been marketed together. So the city does own both those lots and have been marketing them to get an interested investor in both those properties and get them back to working order. So since that time, they both have been sitting vacant. So the S home was demolished and the lot has been sitting vacant, and then the Ernst home was relocated and has been sitting basically in its same state that it has been since being relocated. So the fact that we have someone interested in redeveloping these properties is definitely a plus to get these 2 sites back to working order. And then also just to point out that currently, in this moment, ourselves, the city, and the consultant are actively working to get the Ernst house on the National District as a part of a contributing structure in the Walnut Street Historic District. In doing that, it would provide or open the doors to some grants and other financial incentives through the state, like tax credits, to help fund the project that we're looking at tonight. So again, that's something that we'll be actively looking into and applying for to make sure this project is feasible. So again, back in December of last year, we did bring the concept plan forward in front of you guys to get your initial take at what they were proposing out there and get your feedback kind of on the overall look and how it fits into next to the Ernst home, but also the historic district that it's going into. So at that time, they did bring forward a couple options in terms of the overall look of the building being located next to the Ernst home. So overall, you guys were very favorable of the project itself. You did ask for additional information in terms of additional views of the site of what was being proposed out there, so that is something that they did provide during this site alteration permit for your request. And you also did make the conclusion that you preferred option A over option B in terms of a look and how it fit into the historic district. So provided both those options here as an image for you to look back at. So you kind of saw option A as more of a compatible look for the area that it was locating in. It had more of a residential feel to it as opposed to option B. So in terms of kind of the historic significance of these sites, so 211 Walnut Street, which also holds the Ernst house, also known as the Reedley house, was built in 1884 by Andreas Reedley on the Fireman's Park site. It's a Chaska brick building. It has a T-plan format, cross-wing home. So this was a very common type layout for the buildings of those times. So the overall structure and the fact that it has original Chaska brick makes it a historical significant piece of the community. And then 217 Walnut Street, which was the former S home, had a home on it that was built in 1886 by Joseph S., who also owned a business, or a blacksmith business here in town. That was originally a Chaska brick home, but was later covered by stucco. And then in 2017, it was ultimately demolished due to the fire that happened there. So what we're looking at tonight is a site alteration permit, and that's to redevelop the S lot and then restore the Ernst home at 217 and 211 Walnut Street. So specifically, they are requesting 7 rental apartment units within these 2 sites. So 2 units would go into the Ernst home, 3 units would go into the Townhome building, which is the one just north of the Ernst home and has frontage on Walnut Street. And then 2 additional units will go in kind of the ancillary accessory building in the back, which also will have a parking garage for the dwelling units. So the parking garage will hold 7 stalls within it, so each dwelling unit will have their own interior parking garage, and then there will also be a surface parking lot just adjacent to that, which I'll show. They provided a couple exhibits showing kind of the existing conditions out there with just the Ernst home, which is more situated on the eastern side of it, of the lot it sits on, and then the proposed layout for this site. So as you can see, the townhome building is located just north of the Ernst home. In terms of scale, it's very much in line with kind of the same width and depth, or I should say just the depth of the Ernst home. And in terms of setbacks, they are fairly similar. So from a street level perspective, they're very much in line with each other. The ancillary building or carriage house, also known as, is just to the west of these two buildings in the rear of them. And again, 7 private parking stalls will be provided as a part of that structure. So the surface parking lot and the garage stalls will be accessed by the alley in the back there. So that was currently how, or in the past, how they provided vehicle access to these sites. So they're just maintaining that as a part of this request. They've also provided some floor plans of each of the units. So this is the Ernst home that we're looking at here. So there's one unit that's proposed on the first level of the home, and then the second unit is proposed on the second level of the home. The second unit will be accessed via an exterior staircase on the outside here, which is also in line with how they used to utilize the building. So when it was in its original site on Fireman's Park, they also had an exterior staircase to access that second level. Maybe a little bit different from what they're proposing tonight, but it had the same program out there. And then the basement, there is a basement in this building, and that will be used for storage and whatnot. And then this is the overall look of the building. So they're also showing kind of the changes that are happening to the building as well, which I'll get more in depth with so we can reference back and forth to these images. And then these are the townhome dwelling units on this screen here. These will be 3-story units with a basement, so 2 stories above grade, and then a basement as well. I don't have a basement drawing on here just to simplify things a little bit, but these will have kind of that full living available within that with front porches out to Walnut Street. And then these are the elevations that are proposed. So they are utilizing a Chaska brick blend applied on the first level of this building, with the exception of the northern facade, which doesn't have very much visibility as it'll be backing up against the rears of some businesses. But the brick will wrap around all the way on the first level there, and then they'll use an LP Smart Side lap siding for the second level, kind of a whitish off-white color for that. And then lastly, the carriage house. So again, the parking stalls are on the first level, and then the dwelling units would be accessed on the second level. So they'll have their own personal staircases, which will connect into each of their stalls to be able to access these dwelling units up there. And then this is the elevation drawing for that carriage house. So the garage stalls will be facing towards the alleyways, and they'll have some dormer elements added on both sides to provide transparency into these dwelling units. This will be the side facing towards the townhomes and the Ernst home, so kind of in that central corridor, private yard space area. And then each side of the carriage home will have basically the same application shown on this drawing. So they are using the same LP Smart Side lap siding that will be applied to the townhome building on the second level, and then to provide a little bit more interest and depth and aesthetic to this building, they'll add a board and batten on the first level of that building. We've also included several views of the site and the proposal to give you an understanding of scale and how kind of roof heights relate to each other. So they're all very much the same height and scale. You can see some general consistencies between the Ernst home and the townhome building, as well as the carriage house, with kind of that gabled look, which is also very residential in terms of the overall appearance. They provided kind of the in-between area as well in terms of how that's laid out, and then looking from kind of the west side and east sides to give you different visuals there. And then here's a picture of the materials. I know they brought the actual samples tonight if anyone has questions on those. And then they also included some pictures of the existing conditions of the Ernst home. So it's definitely in a state of needs of repairs out there. Given its move, some of the elements, such as the front porch, were damaged as a result of that. With this new use going in there, it would definitely repair that back to its original state. So with any site alteration permit that we get in, we have to evaluate it based on a set of standards that are in place with our HPC ordinance. So there's 13 standards total that we use to evaluate these requests. And I'll go over only a couple that are applicable to each of these different parts of the request. So kind of breaking it up between the Ernst home and then the Townhome and Carriage home. So with the Ernst home, again, I'm only going to go over a couple, but standard B, which is one of the HPC standards, this one relates to the general compatibility of the architectural style, arrangement, texture, color, arrangement of color, and materials used on existing and proposed structures with the character of the historic resource and its site or the historic district. So with this home, the building footprint is remaining intact, so they're not adding on or taking off any square footage as a result of this project, so that will remain intact. So there's no major exterior changes happening. So the east and south facades of this building are basically just going to be repaired where needed. So the only facades that they're really making changes on are the west and north facades, which are the ones that are not as visible compared to south and east. So they're more interior facades that mainly only the residents are going to be seeing as a result of this. So they'll be repointing the brick out there, making sure that's structurally sound as they restore this building. They are replacing the windows out there to be double hung wood clad with fiberglass windows, which is an appropriate option for window replacement on a historic building. They did indicate that they would be using a bronze trim as opposed to a white. So if you refer back to the original photos here and kind of what's been there over time, they've always had a white trim out there. So our only comment with that would be to look into a white frame option for the windows. They are going to be removing one window on the north facade. I'll show you on the exhibit here, basically here. So looking back at the floor plans, they are rejiggering the internal staircase to gain access to the basement so that it's more of a universal access as opposed to being accessed through the dwelling unit. So with that, it does locate onto this northern facade and in between that window there. So having a window is just not conducive to how they're laying out the program of the dwelling unit. So it does seem like a reasonable change as they are not compromising the window profile as a whole. They're literally just taking out the window and replacing it with a frame there, so that in the event that that piece were to go away and there's an actual opening there, then they can replace the window without altering the actual structure. And then the other change that they are doing is they are adding a door on this west facade. So there is a window there now. So in order to gain access or rear access to the first level dwelling unit, they will be replacing that window with a door, consistent with kind of the existing door profiles that you see out there as well. And then they will also be enlarging this opening a little bit further just to meet code requirements for the building and for this type of use. So those are the overall changes for this building. The exterior staircase is also kind of one of the additions added on to this building, something that's required as a part of this program, and something that we've seen on other historic buildings here in downtown. So they'll be proposing a cedar staircase. So we've used wood or metal staircases on historic buildings before, so that appears to be consistent with kind of traditional applications out there. And then they will be restoring the front porch. So as it sits today, the original posts did not make it through the relocation, which is not surprising given kind of the intensity of that. So they will be replacing that to match what used to exist there. So in terms of meeting the standard, all of the alterations, although small, are done with integrity and are not compromising the structure or kind of the historical character of the building. So they aren't adding anything that's just completely incompatible with the building itself. So they are doing their due diligence to match as closely as possible to the original elements on this building. And then another standard that I wanted to point out is standard D1. A property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. So I kind of mentioned that before. The changes that are occurring are not, again, creating extensive changes to the building. It's rather just getting it into a code-compliant order and usability to be used as a residence. So they are continuing this building as a residential use. It's always been treated as a residence, even in its former location. So having a residential use locate back in this building is definitely appropriate. And in terms of kind of where the building sits today, so the setbacks and the overall scale that used to be there on that site are being maintained or are very similar to what used to be there. So I would say that the overall footprint of the building is probably smaller, a little bit smaller than what used to be there. And then as it relates to the new construction on this site for the townhomes and the Carriage House, I would also note that standard B is applicable to these as well, so how they basically fit in to the area that they're going in. So the townhome building is oriented towards Walnut Street, so because of that, they have a higher presence on the Walnut Street district. So being sensitive to that is how we kind of evaluated this building. So they did, in terms of the overall look of it, provide more of a iconic form that tributes back to the Ernst home and as well as the S home that used to be on that lot. But they're definitely showing that this is a new building. They're not trying to completely mimic the Ernst home in all of its elements, or the S home for that matter. So you can definitely see the difference between the new and the old, between this building and the Ernst home, which is something that needs to be taken into consideration with new construction on historic properties. So they definitely have elements that tie some of the historic elements into the building, but they do so in a way that makes it kind of a newer application. So with the gables, with the Chaska brick blend to kind of fit in with the area, as well as kind of doing their own rendition on the front porch application too. So all of those elements really kind of feed into that district quite well. And then with the Carriage House, we're evaluating this more as kind of an ancillary, secondary structure of the site, which again was a common element found within downtowns or historic downtown. So a lot of the homes within downtown usually have an ancillary structure, a detached garage as a part of their lot. So this is basically just reinforcing kind of that historic secondary structure that you find on those buildings. Mentioned the brick on there, and then with you know, the townhomes using the brick, but then they're also using lap siding. We definitely see that as a compatible material application in this district and next to the Ernst home. So the lap siding is very reminiscent of kind of a residential feel, and the fact that they're doing kind of a white color ties in with kind of the accent colors that you see on the Ernst home with the front porch and the windows. So it'll definitely complement that building quite well. One item of note, which we've done on other newer construction in historic districts, is that we require full modular face brick as opposed to a veneer within new construction.
Elizabeth, can you tell me, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Can you
Sure.
explain
So a
that?
veneer is kind of a smaller or thinner brick application to a building. A full face brick would be the whole brick.
Real brick versus kind of the show.
Right. So sometimes veneers can come in kind of a lick and stick
okay.
application. And I mean that, to try to put it in plain terms there. But that's the difference between them, is the veneer is a much smaller profile in width compared to a full face brick, which is the full brick itself. So again, it's just been a traditional application that we've done on new construction, not only in downtown, but other newer sites in the area too. And then with the Carriage home, using the lap and the board and batten siding, we feel that that's an appropriate application, again, since we're treating this building more as kind of an ancillary building to the area. It seems more appropriate to do kind of a lighter material versus applying brick to it. So we definitely feel that that application is done quite well. Another standard that comes into play is standard D9, which is new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. So as I've stated before, you can definitely tell the difference between the new and the old, between these two new buildings and the Ernst home. The scale and the massing are very equivalent to the Ernst home in the former S home out there. And then the use of a Chaska brick blend on the first level of the townhomes is definitely a favorable choice, and will definitely kind of tie in those historic materials next to them at the Ernst home, but also kind of what you see within the Walnut Street district as well. And then the lap siding that they're proposing out there, again, kind of ties in that residential element that you see not only on residences in downtown, but even on some commercial buildings as well. Utilize that type of siding. And then the use of the white ties in with the Ernst home accents, and then the gables as well. And then one other note was kind of the window profiles that they have for the townhomes, is they are doing double roll-up course on the windows that are on the brick application. So we saw this as perhaps an opportunity to again try to explore brick applications and window applications that are found traditionally in Chaska. So you see a lot of arched window profiles within downtown Chaska. So we definitely see an opportunity to further be explored on those lower level windows of the townhome to see where they can, again, provide another tie-in to the Ernst home that you see there. So one of the conditions of approval is to further evaluate the potential of doing some arched window profiles on the front, and specifically the east elevation that faces Walnut Street of the townhomes. And then lastly, standard D10 is new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that, if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. So the fact that these buildings are not connected physically to the Ernst home can still provide a very similar spatial relationship to what used to be out there. In the event that any of these buildings do get removed, it's not going to impact the Ernst home or the Walnut Street district, as you can definitely tell the difference between the new and the old out there. And then these are the conditions of approval. So some of these are just pretty typical conditions, one relating to the face brick as opposed to brick veneer, and then making sure that the brick blend is reviewed and approved in the field prior to application on the building. It's been kind of a traditional thing that we've done with buildings to ensure that brick blends are compatible with the area that they're going in. And then looking at the white exterior color for the Ernst house windows proposed, and then ensuring that all the doors are reviewed by our department prior to their installation. And then looking at the arched window profiles on the first level of the town home building, east facade, and then another very traditional condition. So with that, we feel that the applicant has done a very good job of creating two new buildings that are very compatible and complementary to the district that they're locating in, as well as locating next to the Ernst home. So you definitely see some tie-ins of the Ernst home, as well as the former S home in that townhome building. So really what they're proposing out there is definitely an added investment in the area. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion tonight to approve the site alteration permit for two new residential buildings and the renovation of the Ernst home at 211 and then 217 Walnut Street. So that's going to be based on the findings that are in the staff report, as well as the conditions that I just laid out within the staff report. The applicants are here, and they do have physical material samples if you have any inkling to take a look at those. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have right now.
Does anyone have questions for Elizabeth?
I do. On tonight's request, it talks about 2 dwelling units, 3 dwelling units, 2 dwelling units, and then it says 7 garage stalls are proposed for each dwelling unit. Is that a, that
That's
would
a
indicate it was
typo.
49.
That would be a typo then.
Okay.
So only 7 garage stalls for the entire
Okay,
site.
are proposed total.
7
Right,
cars.
Okay.
right.
And on the pictures that you have here, where we're talking about white window frames, now these indicate black? Am I looking at that
They're
right?
proposing a bronze window frame. So that
And
would
you're
be
saying it's white in,
on the Ernst home. So I have the existing photos of the Ernst home here, and as you can see, they have white
yeah,
frames. So the color that they're proposing on the new replacement windows of the Ernst home are a bronze
Okay.
color. So we've indicated that in order to match kind of the original out there, that be changed to white.
gotcha. Good.
Would the applicant
You
like
might
to
have a better
speak?
response than me.
Okay, come on up. Come on up.
One thing that I would note on the existing Ernst House windows, what you're seeing in the photos here are actually storm windows. So the storm windows are covering over those existing double hungs, and the storm windows are definitely white on all of the windows. And if I can zoom in, I'm not sure I can here or not. I can't. It's actually the window frames themselves are a little bit inconsistent through the building. So the lower ones here, the window sashes are white, and up here they appear to be a darker color in some of the upper story windows. And we found that even with the windows themselves, with the mutton pattern in the windows, it's not consistent all the way around. Our intention would be to make them all consistent, whether they're white or whether they're bronze. I think white would be perfectly fine. But the idea would be is that we're going to provide some consistency to all of those windows so they have the same mutton pattern, they have the same color on them. We would be putting the windows back without storms. I think we prefer the look of the windows without those storms. We wouldn't need them with modern windows. So it will be a little bit different than what we're seeing on the image there.
How big a deal if you'd like to stay? Is there
Sure.
anything else you'd like to say, add while you're up there?
I'm certainly open to questions as you guys may have them. We can certainly talk about the townhomes as well. Those are obviously a little bit different than what you guys saw the last time we were here. Some of that is based off once we got into unit plans and started looking at the efficiency of the units. We found that having where the previous version was kind of a dormer, where there was a much more sloped roof on those, those weren't terribly efficient for the upper units. And as we're looking at, obviously value of these units and making sure that we've got, enough square footage that we're going to be able to kind of meet the requirements of cost and leasing ability for those. That's kind of one of those things is that we were able to make it more efficient by changing the roof profiles a little bit. We feel obviously that it's still very compatible with the kind of profile of the Ernst House and the rest of the neighborhood. So that's why the form is a little bit different than what you saw at our initial meetings. As we were looking at materials, some of our initial versions had a lot more brick on them. Obviously, costs is an issue. I think we were actually, once we started looking at opportunities to introduce other materials and introduce lap siding, we found that the lap siding, by splitting the building and having a base that's in brick and lap siding above, that was actually much more deferential to the Ernst House. So I think if you imagine if the whole thing was brick, you get these kind of series of brick buildings where having the Ernst House is the only building that's really all full brick actually treats that as more of a precious element to the site, and the townhomes is much more secondary by actually kind of reducing the amount of precious materials that's on that. So in the end, it was good for cost. It was also, I think, good for the kind of overall sense of that street facade and really putting all of the attention on the Ernst House as opposed to the townhomes in that situation.
Are the arch windows a big deal?
I think that's something that we'd want to look at a little bit more. I think one of the issues that we would have is that when we're looking at the potential for arched windows on the first floor, really it's on the east facade, it's really just the one. And I would be a little bit concerned. I mean, we're happy to try that out and review that with Liz and look at some of those options. I think our concern would be that it might if there's only one that has an arched window, it might feel a little bit out of place. I think we get a lot of bang for the buck for introducing the stacked row lock course of brick, which is not typical. Usually if you were going to do a header over a brick window, there'd be some kind of a soldier course or even just use the running bond over. But in this case, the brick patterning is the same kind of brick patterning that's on the Ernst House. Instead of being arched, though, it's kind of a flat treatment on that. So we think that we've got some of that tie-in where it's not completely foreign. We're bringing some of those elements in. I'd just be a little concerned about introducing arches when we can't be more prolific with it. We can only do it in a limited number of locations.
Couldn't you arch the south window and the 3 on the west side and then the 3 on the east side? That's only 7 windows.
Right, so these, where we've got windows, this one, the east one, certainly that one could be arched. On the south side, yep, that one could be arched, and this one, so those three windows would. I don't think we have the opportunity to arch because we don't have the space above is these
I
three
would
windows.
never do the triple, but I
Right.
think just doing 7 at least would put it on,
Right.
make
As-
more sense.
Sure. I think even with the 7, the windows that are in the back versus the front, when you're looking at the building from the street, you don't really sense those other windows. I have to go all the way back to the beginning. Sorry for moving really quickly. And maybe I don't have the first image.
Aren't the,
Is that there, Liz? I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but when you're looking at that front facade, really it's just that first window, those windows in the front that you see. You don't really see the windows on the side. So
Yeah,
that's
you might see the one on the south side, but you're right,
Yeah.
the ones on the west side are
Right.
totally hidden.
Right. And that's, certainly open to exploring that. It's not a deal breaker, certainly.
Just wanted to introduce myself too. I'm Laura Russ. I'm the developer, and this is Nate Golan, the architect you probably gathered. And just wanted to say again, kind of reiterate that we're really excited to do this project and think this is really going to be an exceptional use of the site. It's a very unusual project. The costs for it are basically the same as building 7 single-family homes. And obviously, that's not what they would sell for, or in our case, rent for. And so this is a bit of a stretch and kind of a passion project for us. So we're committed to it and focused on it, but we're also trying to weigh that with just the realities of kind of where the market is. So, but by and large, as Nate indicated, many of the choices that we've begun to make as we've refined this with some more information on pricing and so forth, in many ways have ended up kind of complementing the site. So we'll continue to pursue that as we move into the next stage of approvals. But we'd be happy, Liz covered really everything we had, but we'd be happy to take any other questions or pass around the materials if you'd be interested.
I think just for the record, the number of units, it's quite dense for 2 lots. Liz, could you speak to that? I'm assuming it's financially driven.
right. I can't speak too much to the financial side of things, but in terms of the density count out there,
Yeah, and we'll continue to address this as we move forward with the Planning Commission and so forth, but we actually reviewed a number of different options with the architects and with the city, and this was actually the least dense of them. Others involved, more of what is built typically when apartments are built, which is a box with parking structured or underground. We didn't want to just build a box. We wanted to really enhance the Ernst house, which is why we have this variety of different styles on the site. And I think the variety of styles, the fact that the townhomes all have private yards, those are all really unique features, and I think we'll make it feel urban. That's the intention, but not overly dense is our goal.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one question. It might be more for Liz. Is that alley, who's responsible for repairing that? Will that be the city? It's pretty tough.
I believe the city does own that alley, but we do have it in our master planning to redo that alleyway. One of the things that we're looking at as a part of that is making it a paseo, so more of a pedestrian oriented, but it also can be used for vehicles as well, but creating more of a pedestrian friendly pass through on that block. So it's definitely highlighted as an area that's going to receive improvements, not as a part of this project, but definitely something in the near future with Highway 41.
Yeah, because the parking comes in that alley.
Right.
Off 2nd Street.
Right, yep.
Any further questions?
Cool, thanks very much, Nate and Laura. This is a public hearing at this time at 7:43, opened up for anyone else in the audience who has questions and would like to approach the podium. Not to put any pressure on you. Is there anything you'd like to add or any questions or? If you do, please step up to the podium, just identify yourself, your name and where you live, please.
I'm Chris Greider. I actually don't live in Chaska. I'm here on behalf of Von Hansen's. Our biggest concern would be the access, of course, like you said, that alley is scary. Very bad shape. We have trucks that deliver to us. So the accessing of that, if you're changing the way that's looking at all, looking at the drawings, it doesn't seem to be, to me, to be a big issue. But looking at where they're overlooking is the back end of our area there, our garbage dumpsters, lots of stuff going in and out of there. So that's our concern, is further down the road. As a person who's dealt with a lot of historic stuff in St. Paul, where I grew up, and my family owned, I'm pretty familiar, and that's why I was asked to come. So that would be our concern. We do have a smoker, which I'm sure you guys all are aware of. Been there for over 20 years, and that's another issue to be looking at, how that end is represented, shall I say.
Where's the smoker exhaust
At the back of the building,
Maybe switch to this view.
that aerial view,
Indicate where.
the little bump out, our building's
Do you
all the
wanna-
way to the,
Wait, where's your building?
gosh, I might screw it up. This little bump out is our freezer. Right about there is where the chimney is.
It smells wonderful.
Maybe it was a sell that as a benefit.
I'm responsible for that a lot. Sometimes, but that's where that is. And our dumpsters sit on that pad that's right back there, which I'm sure you saw. You guys. So
Is that intended to be a screen wall there? It looks like something is built along the property line. I don't know whose it is, but.
So there is an existing small concrete retaining wall that I believe is on your property.
Yep.
That goes right through here.
about 2 feet tall.
Yep, and that may be something, depending on grades, that we've got to discuss, that may be something that we're affecting as part of construction, so that would be something we would want to look at. I think you bring up some very good points about visibility and access, and it may be something we want to start considering is if on top of that wall, or on our side of that wall, some kind of a screen structure would be constructed in that situation.
Thank you. Thank you. This time, we're going to close the public hearing at 7:46 PM. Is there any further discussion on the commission? Any questions, points, anything before we vote?
Just a comment that, based, compared to the other two that we saw, I like this much better, this version of,
Nice.
because clearly I didn't like the boxy one of B, and A would still look kind of funny with the.
This one clearly shows like a flow from the Ernst house.
And I like the porches tucked in there, so. I'd move the action requested if that's appropriate at this time.
Yep. So the motion is to approve the site alteration permit for the 2 new residential buildings and renovation of the Ernst home at 211, 217 Walnut Street, based on the findings and conditions listed in the staff report. Would anyone like to make that motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. No, thank you very much. Then we move on to other business. If any commissioner has any other issue they'd like to bring up at this time?
After the mention of the smoking, I'm hungry.
Right?
Put that, it's in the record, Scott.
Hey, I've got keys.
Well, if there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned. It looks like
I just have one
Liz?
thing to add. And I already sent you an email on this, but just want to make note of it on record, about the joint work session that we're conducting on Monday, June 17th. I know it's really far in advance, but if there's a way to, be proactive to put it on your calendars, it's definitely going to be a very beneficial work session for you guys to attend. We'll be bringing someone in from the League of Minnesota Cities, who's going to talk about open meeting laws, general governance, and some of the other things that you guys do on a monthly basis, being elected officials. So you'll be able to attend that with the other commissions as well, and just get a better understanding of kind of what you do in your role. So again, that'll be at 4:30 p.m. here in the council chambers, right before that city council meeting that night. So it should last maybe a couple hours at the most. But yeah, having your attendance there, I think would be very beneficial. So that's all I have.
Thank you. It's on the calendar.
4:30
Did you say the meeting was here in the?
Yes. In the council chambers, 4:30, June 17th.
Anything else, Liz?
I don't have anything else.
Thank you for preparing us. We appreciate it. Can we get a motion to adjourn, please? Second?
Second.
Okay, great. The meeting is adjourned at 7:50.